So in this proof, we are going to assume that the two main lines are parallel, and we're trying to show that angle 4 and angle 6 are congruent. The only thing we can use right now is corresponding angles postulate. We do not, just for the setup for this one, that's the only one we're allowed to use. So my thought process on this is you always want to have a plan first, but you know we're trying to show that 4 and 6 are congruent. In the picture it looks like they are. And so pick one of those two angles, 4 or 6, and make a connection with corresponding angles. So what I'm going to use is angle 4. And I know that angle 4 and angle 8 are related through corresponding angles. Okay, so that's one thing that I know. I just need to keep that in the back of my mind. And then since I've introduced angle 8, and I need to somehow connect it to angle 6 in the end, right? I already know 4 and 8 are related. I need to start thinking about how 8 and 6 are related. So if I choose a different color here, just doing black, I guess, but I know that 8 and 6, there's a connection there because they're vertical angles. All of these types of angles, relationships, are congruent, so that makes life a little bit easier too. So now I just need to kind of write that process down. I know 4 and 8 are the same for a certain rule. I know 8 and 6 are the same for a different rule. Therefore, 4 and 6 are the same. I just need to think about how everything is connected. So in our proof, the first thing we always write down is the given. So we're going to say L is parallel to M, because that's the given. Okay, and doesn't necessarily matter the next step, but since I mentioned 4 and 8 first, I'm going to say that one. So angle 4 is congruent to angle 8, and the relationship there was corresponding angles postulate, and that's the one rule that we're allowed to use in this one. After that, I mentioned that angle 8 was going to be congruent to angle 6 because of vertical angles theorem. So we kind of talked about the reasoning for all of that so far. Now I just need to think about this last step. Why then would I be allowed to say angle 4 is congruent to angle 6, which is what I want to say from the proof statement. So if we just look at steps 2 and 3, 4, I'm just going to use the term equals, 4 equals 8, and 8 equals 6. We'd like to say substitution here, but substitution only works when we actually have equal symbols here, when we're talking about numbers and measures. Here we're talking about the shapes being the same. They look the same. And so in this case, when we still have kind of, in general, things are equal to each other, the property that we use here is called the transitive property. So if you look up that rule on one of our worksheets that we have, okay, the transitive property of congruence is what allows us to make the connection using 2 and 3 to get to step 4. Okay, so using steps 2 and 3 with the transitive property, that's what allows me to say step 4. It's that chain reaction. So be looking for that pattern in other proofs. When we have the series of congruent angles or congruent segments down the road, the way that we tie them all together is through the transitive property. We'll stop here for this video.